children.
Morning, everybody. How's it going? Welcome back to the collective. I think we're just gonna.
What's going on?
Oh, I didn't see you there.
I'm just over here trying to do my best.
Just gonna take a drink here. Hold on a second.
Whatever. No big deal.
It's like perhaps maybe something like this could be in the near future purchasable for some people out in the internet if they wanted to. I don't know. Do their best. Perhaps.
We all try to.
We all try. That's right. While we're trying to do our best, what we really should do is hit the like button, subscribe, and make sure you hit the notification bell, because that is also important to doing our best, doing your best, so that you can listen to us do our best, so that you can do your best.
Why not?
There you go. We got, look at that. Winterstorm's joining us. Morning, Winterstorm.
Morning.
You know, I'm kind of thinking I should send him a mug just for the sake of it. He's been
you're
fire
right.
since day one, and I think he deserves a mug.
In fact, it's a little disappointing that you haven't already done that. I was thinking that yesterday that you should do that.
Yeah. I could see that. I didn't read your mind, though, and that seems to be my biggest problem right now.
I actually didn't think that at all.
Glenn, what's up? How's it going?
Hey, buddy.
Good to see you. You guys got any thoughts? Oh, there we go. Look at that deal.
It is a deal.
It's just like,
Get on it, Burls.
Absolutely. Satch in Motion. Good morning. Good morning, Satch.
Buddy.
What's up?
Just did a little live with Satch.
Yeah, I just saw that. I was listening on beforehand.
Good catch up.
For Winterstorm, shoot me a DM. Give me your address. I will get you a mug.
Bam.
As you're part of the game, part of the team. Yeah, and Zach got one as well. So
I like that. Hey, just make sure that all of those coffee mugs are paid for with our operating fund.
Right.
Oh yeah, that's right. We don't have one.
You mean my bank account?
That's right.
The operating fund. I like it.
Same.
Yeah. So any thoughts today? Anything you guys got on your head, or you guys want to jump into something off the top of your head?
Yeah, I did want to ask you, buddy, if the mental health walk happened yesterday.
Sure did.
It did? Okay. I wasn't sure if I missed it or not or whatever.
Yeah, it did. And do you know what the concept was on this one?
No, I don't. I didn't even see any media on it at all. I don't know why.
Sorry. You are referring to the one in the interior.
Yeah, I'm referring to the one out your way.
Oh, out my way. Yeah, it did happen. Okay. So yesterday we were supposed to get a lady that is terminal, a cancer terminal. She is literally, it likely would have been her last walk on the planet. And she had really, really wanted to join us for the last probably 6 months, but she's obviously, life had other plans with everything that was occurring with her health and everything. So we had actually let everybody know that was the case. We had a great showing. We had an amazing location, which she had chosen, which is Blackie Spit in BC. And if you've never been there and you have a chance to go, it's one of the most paradisiac places I've ever seen in BC. And it's in South Surrey or White Rock, whatever you want to call it. And so the idea was to bring her in at the end of the walk, because she can't stay out too long, and because she's immunocompromised, and if something happens, she'll be sick right away, and that's not the way that she kind of wants to go. And we basically, what the idea was to get her in to come and speak to our people, and for us to do our 5 minutes of mindfulness, which is something that we do every single walk, surrounding her, not like super tight, but like do a big kind of circle and really surrounding her, and do it for 2 minutes instead of 5, and just send all this
positive energy,
collective energy inwards, and whether you believe in that or not, just wait till everybody sends it your way. You'll see how it can affect you. And I can testify to this. My injury last year, it was absolutely amazing how I felt. So anyways, we're trying to do this. Of course, it didn't happen. So what we ended up doing is we ended up writing a post. After we sent her a beautiful picture, wrote a post, and hopefully we get to see her on the next one. I know that she is struggling very much. So
right.
Mm-hmm. Dang, that's pretty awesome though. That you can create a collective event to harness that collective energy and put it in one direction. That's just fantastic.
Have you ever tried it, Chance? Have you ever been involved in anything like that before?
Once or twice. I mean, with the Canadian Walk for Veterans, and we've been doing that for the last 5 years, and we've been
No, I mean like
energy
a
stuff.
focalized, like everyone nods at each other, everyone knows exactly what is about to go down, and everyone does maximum effort at sending positive vibes to someone in a collective group.
I don't think so. I think the only thing close was that DZ Remembrance at
Oh yeah.
Pegasus Jump. That'd be the closest.
To some degree, I think, but I do believe that there's a difference. I mean, Seb, you what do you feel? Do you think that there's a difference between sort of considering it being different than we're all gonna freaking crush maximum effort on positive vibes?
Yeah, I think so. What happens, obviously, to us as individuals is we go our different paths if it's not clarified, right? So if we're standing along together in a crowd and we're setting parameters around what we are supposed to do, then we're not going in different directions. Because I could be introspecting while the other person is thinking about somebody they lost, and the other person is thinking about something else. So the energy is actually kind of everywhere, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, the powerful nature of that moment on the LZ was undeniable. Like, it was extremely powerful, and I cannot wait to do it again. But if you are actually directing all of your thoughts, all of the things that are going through your minds through one person, I truly believe, and call me, whatever you want. Everybody knows that I love science as much as the other guy, but I also like spirituality, and that is undeniable. When people send positive, truly send positives, waves your way, and everybody's doing it as a collective. When I was in Toronto, I had some feelings that I've never felt in my entire life, but there was also probably 100,000 people thinking about me, and it does something. It does something truly, truly, truly meaningful.
I've experienced it myself. I think that it's a thing, and anyone can line up in front of me and tell me that it isn't, and I'll just smile and say cool. But I know it to be true.
Well, they did this science experiment. I don't remember when, but I remember seeing a documentary on it. Was that they took plants and they planted them, two of them in the same chambers, or the different chambers in the same environment, and then had a bunch of school kids walk by it and insult one and speak to the other one in kind words, and there was a distinctive difference. It's been a while since I'd have to look that up, but it was pretty cool.
I actually heard about that, so I'm kind of familiar with the story, and it certainly wasn't an urban legend. Like, it was an actual bona fide.
Yeah. There's a lot of examples like that are science based, that can to some degree quantify what is happening. But I mean, who even knows what's happening? Does anyone? I mean, we're wrapping science around the interpretation of what we all think is happening, but at the end of the day, we're all just supposed to be energetic particles, wavelengths, as it were. And so, man, you can choose not to believe in energy, or you can believe in it. I choose to believe in it because I know it's a thing. I mean, you can see it through science, but you shouldn't obscure it with science. It shouldn't get muddied.
Sure.
It's wavelengths, but no one has to pretend that it's not wavelengths. I mean, just accept that it's wavelengths, and then build it up into human beings, and then build it up into human beings can send wavelengths. That's how I see it anyway.
For sure. And even if it was science-based, there's a lot of things that are still you cannot explain with science, period. There's sometimes all evidence points to a certain thing, and that thing isn't the root cause of whatever it is that's occurring, and they can't explain why it's occurring. So there is bigger things in play. There's no question.
And isn't that the charm of life, though? I mean, if we all had everything figured out, I'm not going to say I wouldn't want it, because it would be kind of cool to know everything. But I like the charm of the mystery of life, man.
Agreed.
If you are not a seeker of knowledge, if you are not an adventurer, if you are not inspired by trying to discover things, then this next sentence won't work for you. But I love finding out the mysteries of the world. And there's just so many mysteries to discover.
Doing the puzzle is the fun part. Right? It's not the fact that you finish the puzzle and look at it and go, wow, cool, that's done. Okay, now it's time for another puzzle. But it's the actual doing of the puzzle, it's the figuring the stuff out, that's the fun part. And the best quote I've heard so far about this came yesterday. from, I believe it was Winter Storm, that said, quoting from Shaun, "You don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what I'm talking about. Do more push-ups."
That was that was building off of the haiku that I was starting to create in real time.
Right. The real-time haiku.
What is even going on?
We got to get this on a t-shirt.
Yeah, that's we're planning. I'm working on it. The merch development team. Look, Winter Storm's helping me. Merch development team. He's on it.
That's right.
So Glenn asks, I want to hear details about that shawarma that Shaun had back east. Apparently, is it something to talk about on the collective?
Yeah,
what do you think?
You know what? What's interesting about that question, even though I know Glenn is kind of having a bit of fun with it, but it is kind of indicative of how you can run your life. So I knew I was going out to Ottawa. I knew I was going to be busy, but I also knew there were some boxes that I wanted to check. Back in the day, I used to love me a good old greasy, garlicky shawarma when I was banging around in Ottawa. So I knew that box had to get checked. And so on my way out there, I hit up some pals and said, what's the deal? Where do I have to go? What is the box that needs to be checked? And it was Shawarma Palace. And, you know, I've eaten there many a time, I suppose, but it's good to go back to the box that needs to be checked based on your pals saying that's the one. And so it wasn't just a shawarma, and it wasn't just closing a loop. What it was a continuation of a timeline process that had a gap of about 20 years that really doesn't exist anymore, because I closed the loop on it. And so now, next time I'm at Shawarma Palace, who knows what? But it's not like that was my last time or my first time. It's just a time that's connected to other times. And I just see it as a timeline, a stream of my life, you know? So it was more than just a shawarma. And I was with a good buddy who's been on a timeline with me that I could share that timeline, whether we could both nod and think, yeah, legit, not just the shawarma, but this, what we're doing right now.
It's about building that moment, right? It's no longer, it doesn't even matter what the shawarma is. It doesn't matter what the food is. It doesn't matter. It's about building that one moment that you can go like, yeah, I did it.
Yeah. And we create our destiny to some degree with thoughtful action, thoughtful intention. I would have never eaten a shawarma if I hadn't have thought that has to happen. And not just because I'm hungry. We were there for entirely different reasons than we needed calories, you know?
Go ahead, Chad.
Oh, sorry.
I was actually just breathing. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Darth Vader. I was going to say, you know, it's interesting because it's almost like we as a collective have a tendency to seek the things that are really remarkable when the best things in lives are the little things that we can do on the daily.
Oh, yeah.
And that's, you know, I remember when, you know, the divorce happened many years ago. It's over a decade ago now, but it's not the big events, the big family vacations or that I missed. It was like brushing the girls' teeth, you know, those types of things, the little things, and they're really truly meaningful. And that's why it's critically important when you're in there in that moment to embrace that moment. Like there is nobody's business. Like it's much more than just eating a shawarma. This is an experience with a friend that you are lucky enough to still have with you in your life as a, you know, because we know that things get weird and people get lost along the way. And then attaching the experience and the totality of the circumstances into that one moment. And you can make every moment so powerful. But what we do is we skim over the small moments all the time, looking for the next thing that's big, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you know, it was a big moment that took me out there. But that was just the
cherry on the sundae.
It was, because it was all the other stuff that was the most important, as you said.
Agreed.
I like that a lot. I had a little moment with my boys this morning. We got a new fridge, and I put it in the garage with Amber. And,
what, like a fancy one, or?
Well, it's kind of fancy. It's fancy for us.
Okay.
And we came back in, and both the boys were crying, and we're like, what just happened? And one of them said, oh, well, I hit this guy. And we're like, you hit your brother? And he goes, well, yeah, because he hit me first. Okay, well, wait. And we got this whole story. We were dealing with him afterwards, and I was talking to them. I'm like, is all of the stuff now worth the hitting each other? And I looked up, and Kinley, my youngest, has this, he's got this blanket that's got a triceratops head on it that he puts on his head. And he had
like a shiner.
And like a
Carrot
Kleenex
stuck up his
stuffed
nose.
up to his nose, and he had his hands on his head, and he looked over at me, and I couldn't stop myself. I just broke down laughing, and then they broke down laughing. We all just sat there and kind of giggled to each other for about 30 seconds. And it's those little moments, even in the midst of all the other stuff that was going on. It's those little moments, man, that you have to take and really appreciate. And there was times years ago that I would have tried to been, no, I have a point. I need to make it. No. Now I'm just like, okay, yeah, that's too funny not to laugh at, to not be in that moment. And I think it's important to be there. We have a couple of comments and a couple of questions here. Here's a question for you guys. Do we want to do questions from the interwebs? Because I have a couple. Or do we want to do a comment or a topic and discuss the topic and then get into the questions after? What do you think?
Whichever makes the biggest impact for other people who are listening.
I like that. Okay, let's do. I think the biggest impact will be the topic then. Here it goes. You ready for this one?
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about this the other day, and someone brought up the question: is the issue with the world right now the level of arrogance increasing, or the level of accountability decreasing, or is it a mixture of both? And so I've been thinking about this for the last little while, and I'm not even sure. I'm not sure if it's one or the other, or if it's both, or if it's something that we just see more of, right? With social media and with the news cycle and with all this other stuff. Do you think that it's even any different than it was, say, 20 years ago, society-wise? Or do you think it's kind of the same? What are you guys' thoughts? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is a sort of gargantuan oversimplification of what's going on in the world, right? Like,
great word.
I like it. 100%.
I wouldn't even venture into the hypothesis that those two things are the only thing that are responsible for some of the stuff that we have going on, and definitely those two things are problematic and contributors. But as far as like breaking down what is actually occurring, I think we would need a lot more than that. But if we take these two things at face value, I think they're inversely proportionate. Like, I mean, they're not. It's not one versus the other. If the arrogance is increasing, therefore the accountability is decreasing. It's not necessarily that they're, and so I do believe that accountability is a big problem in our society, and the reason why that is because we as a society have turned into a victim society, and that is a big problem. And likely a strong contributor of this is how comfortable we have been for how long, and I truly believe that that's the case. But again, just a hypothesis, right?
No, I agree with that, buddy. The comfort zone is killing us as a society. I said pretty much exactly the same thing yesterday. It's hard to understand how much arrogance is increasing and how much accountability is decreasing unless you go out and try to figure out who or what or where someone is doing it better, where someone isn't mega arrogant and where someone is mega accountable. You got to go find the benchmark in order to understand how you're delivering against that benchmark. So for me, it was this weekend. I like to calibrate myself from time to time. You know what? When I want to get squared away, I go hang out with a guy called Seb. And when Seb is too busy, when he won't graciously host me, then I have to fly across Canada to go to Ottawa for 48 hours. And so by standing in a room full of people who lack arrogance and have maximum accountability, it's a pretty quick way to get recalibrated. There wasn't a person in that ballroom on the weekend who was a victim. They were the polar opposite. And yet there was people in that room who, if they weren't so squared away, they could have spent all day long for the rest of their life being a victim, because they've got all the right to be. They've gone through all of the stuff in order to say, now I get to kick back and be a victim. Because literally, they've had their asses whooped. And so they could easily fall into that mindset, but not a man in there suffers from a victim mentality. The contrary being, they are relentless pursuers of excellence. And that understanding of you can always do it better. I need to do it better. I want to do it better. That's what strips out the arrogance. The moment you start getting arrogant is the moment that you go static and think that you got it all figured out and I don't need to get any better at anything. Every man in that room held every other man in that room accountable. There is a process. There is a system in place that if you're with the right people, they'll look at you and say, bro, did you just say that? I mean, we talked about it yesterday. Am I wrong?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you got to surround yourself with people who will keep you honest, keep you on the straight line, and hold you to a level that makes you want to go to a higher level.
Yeah. So here's a question then. How do you recognize within yourself that your arrogance is increasing? Because you can believe that you're holding yourself accountable. You can think that you're being accountable to the world, but it could just be that your arrogance is when I thought I used to be good to go, I thought I was being accountable. So how do we figure out where that line is, where we can understand that we're being arrogant or that we have a lack of accountability to ourselves or others? How do we do that?
Yeah, I mean, you can wrap a turd in chocolate, but when you bite in it, it will taste exactly the same. And
Yep.
I mean, yeah, and what something that Shaun said that struck me and is actually the last statement was extremely accurate. But there's two reasons why people are arrogant. It's either because they think they're at a certain level or because they know they're not. Right? So they think they're at a certain level or they know they are not and they're overcompensating. So I always look at arrogance as insecurity. And it generally is the case. It's generally there's so much insecurity in certain individuals that they overcompensate and they come across as strongly overcompensating, which is arrogance, really.
Mm-hmm.
And so I look at arrogance through a lens of compassion more than I used to. Whereas before, if somebody was truly arrogant, it used to irritate me to no end. And I'm not suggesting that if you're in a tier 1 team and somebody has that, I'm not going to start psychoanalyzing them. They're in the wrong spot to have that mentality at the time. And we don't have time to fix you and go down your past and explore your childhood trauma to deal with it. So I understand that. But also, if this person doesn't have my back and I don't rely upon them to survive, now I look at it with a lot more compassion than I used to, simply because oftentimes that's exactly what it is. And once you start breaking it down and you start having the conversations with them, it becomes very apparent that they're extremely insecure and you can start addressing things. There's only one way to fix that. You absolutely need to be 100% honest with yourself. 100% honest with yourself, and you cannot sugarcoat it. You cannot add victim mentality. You cannot change your circumstances. If you're incapable of doing that, have the conversations with the people that you truly trust to tell you the truth, not what you want to hear. And if you have nobody in your life that you can tap on the shoulder to be told, you're in the wrong circles and you're surrounded by the wrong friends. You have to find somebody that will challenge you and that will actually say. But also, once you do, you need to accept that you are not going to like what you hear. That is part of the process. None of this is comfortable. None of this is pleasant. It's not supposed to be. It's difficult.
Yeah.
I like that.
And otherwise, you're just hanging out in the comfort zone, thinking you're the man.
Yeah.
Yeah, look
I'm
at
the
me
man.
go. I haven't stepped out of my house in a couple of years, but I'm the man. And it's difficult, but let me ask you this, Seb, because I've struggled with this in my past. Because I think you fully well understand this. In order to operate at the highest levels, whatever that means to anyone, you've got to have a certain amount of confidence in yourself, in what you've been taught, in the skills that you have, in your mind, in your body, in your soul, all of that good stuff. you've got to be really, really confident to the point that it borders on arrogance. And I know. I saw the look. I look at myself the same way when I start saying this kind of stuff. But you've got to be really, really confident. And in the past, I've taken it almost like maybe I've been a bit too arrogant. I don't know. But I know that to do some things, I've had to project a certain amount of confidence internally and externally to achieve what needed to be achieved. And I do believe that there is maybe it's a fine line, maybe it's a big line, I don't know, but there's a line that is pretty close to maximum confidence bordering on almost arrogance.
Yeah, I agree. You know, what's really interesting about this, Shaun, is, and if we start breaking it down, generally speaking, if you have a perception of arrogance, that means that perhaps there is an over compensation on the one end, but it also could be an indication that your insecurities are flaring up, right? Because some human beings that are either much like you or better, or whatever the case may be, may trigger insecurities in yourself, which then is masqueraded as you perceiving them as being arrogant. But what's actually occurring is that you are being put in front of a version of someone that creates your insecurities to react.
Yeah, buddy.
Right. So it's important. And sometimes, and most of the time, just as with anything, generally the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Very rarely is it black and white. And so for me, this is a thing that I've been consciously working on, because I had a tendency to do this, which was to impose on other people what they thought of me, which is definitely an insecurity mechanism, definitely is, right? And so what I started doing is I started actually bringing the sort of logically overriding my emotions. If I had an adverse reaction to somebody, I would start looking internally and ask myself, why are you reacting adversely to this guy? And what has he actually done to deserve this? And oftentimes it was like, he's done nothing. So now it allowed me to check myself. And we've spoken about this like a ton. You never get over those processes. We're humans. Our emotions will flare up. You need to control them. Don't act like you can't control your emotions. Like, we need to be in control of our emotions. So when they flare up and I start thinking a certain way, I bring this back to me. What can I do to make this better? Not, what has this guy done to make me feel this way? Again, that's the victim mentality masquerading as something else,
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. The Winterstorm's got a great comment here. Your arrogance increases as your ability to be wrong decreases. And I think that is pretty accurate overall. I think that's a great spot. Great line.
There's another way that as I was thinking it through, listening to what you were saying, Seb, one of the things that I did this weekend, being surrounded by all those characters, was it's impossible to be arrogant with a crew like that. I mean, come on. And so what it also did was it didn't decrease my confidence in myself, but it made me look at my sense of confidence as, yeah, I'm a confident, capable guy, but holy moly, look at this dude in front of me. And it's important to have those kind of yardsticks to be able to establish, okay, I'm a confident guy, but there's a guy in front of me who's more capable than I am, who is more confident than I am, because he's done this, that, and the other thing. His body of work allows him to be quietly confident without being arrogant. It's nice to stand in front of more excellence than the excellence you've experienced over the last year or two, kind of thing. You know what I mean? The more you can surround yourself with amazingness, the less you think that you're amazing.
So you're saying, Shaun, that you didn't walk into that group of people with your thumbs in your belt going like, I'm a friggin' podcaster now, didn't you know?
Bro, I tried to say it as little as possible, but some guys ratted me out.
Good for them.
Yeah.
I thoroughly appreciated that.
Let me guess. This came by way of a sergeant major saying something during.
It's not great.
Oh,
That's outstanding. Seb, you had a point before I had to make fun of Shaun.
I forgot what it was.
I forgot what it was.
It mustn't have been that important.
My head's still reeling from it.
I was gonna say, you know, what's really interesting is if you take the ultimate human experience, which is combat, like you find anything else that built that in terms of intensity and in terms of extremism of human experience, combat. And so if you are taking people that have not only done the things that they have done, but you now send them into combat, which, you know, this last 20 years, I mean, since 2001, when they bring that back and that quiet sort of confidence that comes from that experience, which is very, very hard to come by, and ideally nobody has to, but it does happen, obviously. In my opinion, it compounds and intensifies everything. Like, it gives them such an incredible sort of inner strength that's really hard to match. It's very difficult.
Yeah, it is. Now, I'm going to play devil's advocate with you, just for fun.
Sure.
I agree with what you said, so I've established that. But now I want to be a jerk.
Yep.
So
I wouldn't expect any difference.
Surprise!
Bring my A game. So, you know, in that room, to your point, Seb, 100%, it's easy to understand all of what you just said as applying to that room full of characters. But on the other end of the spectrum, I know guys who've been in combat and they are not doing well. They are not confident. They are not performing. They're not getting out of their house. They're not getting off their couch. They're only eating cold pizza every night. So it can create a person to become something incredible through the fiery process. But I just want to throw this at you and see what you think. That can happen if you are surrounded by the right people on the regular. But if you're in combat and then you come out of combat and then you say, tag, I'm out of here, and then you bounce and you don't surround yourself with awesome people to calibrate properly against, you can start sliding backwards pretty quickly until you're just sitting in your toxic stew, which we've all seen occur as well, of course. So it can create an awesome human being, but it can also create a broken human being based on who you surround yourself with.
I really like the idea of calibration. And I think this is I'm a bit of an example here, is that when I first got back, I surrounded myself with very like-minded people at the time, and I was bitter. I was angry. I didn't want anything to do with a lot of people, and I sat in it. I stewed in it for quite some time. And then I got out of the army. I did the same thing. And I didn't start surrounding myself with awesome people initially. It wasn't until I started actually doing something about my own issues and started working on my own stuff that I started going, oh, I don't really want to hang out with this guy because he just sits around and complains all day. Well, that's no fun for me. So I'm going to go find something else. I'm going to figure out something else to do. And then I started hanging around with people who were working for doing stuff with their lives and actually wanting to be something. And then I started hanging with you guys, and it was like, man, all right. Like, and then you just start working your way up the ladder a little bit, and you get yourself out of that hole, and then you start striving, you start doing stuff. But a lot of it comes from the calibration of who are you around, because you can sit in that stew, as we've said and we've seen many times. And actually, Winterstorm's got a comment on here. Think about someone who is excessively negative about everything. Things always seem to be tougher for them. It may be attitude adjacent, but being surrounded by negativity must have an effect. And it absolutely does. Absolutely does.
There is no question that that's the case. Zero question. Sorry, were you done there, Chad?
Yeah, no, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Just to respond to Shaun, because I obviously think I should. I actually love that you brought that up, because I didn't do a very good job of articulating myself, because certainly, I mean, you either grow out of an experience like this, or so it's not about how awesome it makes a human. It's more about them specifically in that room. This, the confidence that's already built into them, and now you add the other piece, and they come out of there generally, like very impactful humans. I mean, I've as you know, I've been there. either training with them or on courses or whatever, and you can feel the seriousness of that room, and even though there's a lot of fun to be had and all these other things, but man, those are humans that have been through the fire and back, and so I was specifically referring to them. But it's critically important that we understand the difference between the two, because yes, there is people right now stewing, and they will continue to stew. In fact, they will bitch about this episode and continue to do the things that they do, and there's just nothing we can do to help them until they make that call. But or we continue to do what we do, and eventually, if they come around, then they can go back in time and start at number one, and they have 365 episodes to tap into.
There's a couple. Yeah, gotta work your way through it. I'm doing the same thing with Jocko. I started back at number one. I'm now at 300 something.
Oh God, man.
Yeah, I'm catching up. The problem is when he starts putting out, because he continually does it every week, and then I'll find another podcast and be like, ooh, I want to listen to that one for a little while, and then I'll start falling behind. I'm like, oh no, I got to keep going back up. It's fun. So whoever is out there, if you're not up for it right now, just wait until the year's over, and you're going to have a lot to catch up on. It's going to be good times.
But you'll never catch up, and you'll never climb out of your hole. You'll never even go look for a ladder to climb up one rung, unless you think that there's a rung to climb. And it's easy to get arrogant in your toxic stew at home, all up in your own grill, not talking to anyone else, thinking that you're a badass or you're an ass kicker or you're at the top of the ladder or whatever you want to categorize it as. It's easy to do that if you're not recalibrating against what actual ass kickers look like, how they think, how they move, how they walk, how they talk, how they operate together, how they are freaking awesome. So Seb, you've had the luxury or the privilege, just as I have had the luxury and privilege, to go stand on that dirt and be around those characters and see a level that not too many people get to see. And if you've never seen it, you just simply can't understand it. But the moment you see it, you can't unsee it. And there's the devil in the details. You'll never shift. You'll never reach for a ladder. You'll never crawl up out of the hole unless you bump into someone who's inspiring you enough, or a group that's inspiring you enough to drop the arrogance and go seek confidence by trying to do better.
Yeah. There's an aura too. There's like a feeling when I've had I've had an opportunity a couple of times to step into a room full of operators, and I am not one by any means, but step into a room full of them, and there is a feeling. You walk in there, you're like, oh, like the air shifts. It's a different room all of a sudden. It's pretty amazing. Any other thoughts on this before we jump on to? I know we're just skimming the surface of this, but
we did kind of hit arrogance, but I feel like we didn't really hit accountability.
Okay, well let's dive into accountability then, because it's the other part of the equation. And I think that if we really want to talk about accountability, Seb mentioned it earlier, is that you got to look inwards. You got to be 100% honest with yourself. How? Yeah. How do we be 100%
as calibrated
honest?
Against what? Your own head? Your own thoughts of how much of an ass kicker you are?
So
how do we do that?
So it really depends what kind of introspection you like to lead, right? And what kind of human you are in terms of emotions and how you're reacting to things. So of course I'm using my own baseline. My own baseline is, here's the truth. If I'm being 100% honest, I feel it inside my gut that I'm making stuff up. That I do. And so the only reason why I refuse to look at it is because I will fully refuse to look at it, not because it's not there and I can't feel it. Right? So if you're truly at the point where you legitimately don't think you have any insecurities or trauma or anything that's affecting your ability to be and optimize who you can be, then you're going to have to do some professional work, right? Like in how that looks like. And you can start with surrounding yourself with the right people and having people to calibrate against. But the problem is if you are that if your situation is so insidious that once you find yourself in the right group, you're not getting the right messages out of what they're putting out because you're not even at the point of receiving them, it's not going to help you. You actually will need to deal with those issues before you can do that. And so however that looks like, I'm not pretending to be, anything I'm not. But for me, I will say that in the vast majority of cases, we as humans know that we are making stuff up, but we continue and we dig our heels in, and that's our egos preventing us from addressing those things.
Yeah, I got nothing to add to that because I wish I could have said that.
I need a mic drop button or something that I could just like drop a little.
Yeah, I want it to be that little Euro thing. Oh, wah, 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 the Euro disco noises.
With some disco ball, of course.
100%, buddy.
Get
Notice how I
some bass
said
going on
ball.
in the background. Julie says, "Good afternoon. We can all improve our game somehow. There is always someone better than you that you can learn from." I think that's a great point. But here's the question then. What if you are the person? What if you you follow the people and then you follow the timelines and you're like, you know what, like Nim's Persia, and you're just like, you know what, I'm gonna crush all the records. Now he's the man. Was the man.
100%, buddy. You beat me to it.
There you go. So in that moment when you are the pinnacle of whatever it is you're doing, then who do you look to?
Well, that's one area of his life.
Yeah,
there's multiple areas. There's multiple layers to this. It never stops. You can always get better somewhere.
There we go. That was what I was hoping somebody would go into. Also, Julie says, "Nice shirt, Shaun."
Represent.
So, well, I mean, it goes into what we're talking about, though, right? You are a world solo champion, 24 hours at one point, and you were in that moment. And then what? What was your next, like, where am I going to go from here?
Well, fascinating. You should ask that question because that's how I was going to address the answer. So, there are two things in play here. If you're seeking so hard that you find yourself at one point in your life becoming the man or the woman, we'll say, whatever that means to anyone out there. Then what? Well, I've always acted in parallel. Always. It's about me, but it's about my team. Sometimes I have to prioritize myself in order to do better for the team. Sometimes I have to prioritize on the team in order to do better for myself. But all my life, maybe not all my life, since I joined the Army, since then, the rest of my life has always been a parallel path. I walk the way, but I walk it in two ways, me and the gang that I'm walking it with. Now, whether they're right next to me physically, all armed up with weapons or with bikes or with coffee or whatever, if they're physically standing next to me, it's game on then, just the same as if they're not walking next to me and they're elsewhere, they're virtual, they're whatever, they're with me in spirit, it's still game on. So that you don't need to stand next to me for it to be game on. It is game on with me and it's game on with my team. So if I can't do it for me, I do it for my team. When you become a world champion, what? You become a double world champion, a triple world champion? Who knows? But once I became one, I reverted my gaze to how can I take all of these lessons and then push those into all of my athletes in order to make the team world champions. So there's always a way to find a way to become better for yourself and for others, I think.
Absolutely. Any points on this, Seb?
No, man, that was savage.
And this is what the reason I want to talk about this specifically is that for those people that are in their basement thinking that they're awesome, that they are the world champions of whatever it is they're doing while they're stewing in their own incessance, well, turn your view to the team. Instead of thinking about yourself, start thinking about the people around you and then make their lives better. And I think that was kind of where I wanted to go with it, at least, is the fact that I kind of thought I knew what Shaun's answer was going to be to that to begin with. So I was hoping to lead him down the track and it worked. I feel good about myself. Haha.
No pun intended.
Congratulations.
I need a pat on my back. Hold on a second. There we go. I feel better now. But yeah, so now going back to accountability, we now have recognized that we are not awesome. We're sitting in our mom's basement, and we need to now hold ourselves accountable to what it is we want. Where do we go from there? So now we've realized that we're no longer on the pinnacle. We're no longer top dog. We're no longer standing on top of the mountain. And we start looking up and going, oh my God, now it's an insurmountable hole. Insurmountable. Now what? Where do we go from there? How do we build ourselves from that hole now that we've torn ourselves down to get back up? Seb?
How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
One bite at a time. I like
right?
that.
So what I like to do, and this isn't for everybody, it works great for me, is when I call myself out on something, I will make a plan. That to me, that's important. So, and I'm not sure where everybody else is going with this, but for me, I will make a plan. I will actually write it down. What are some of the areas that I've identified I need some work in, and where am I going to go to make that happen, and where am I going to start? So you need to do two things. You need to have a plan that's realistic, actionable, and sustainable. Everybody wants to do everything right away, and everybody wants the results right away, and everybody wants to do things that are from black to white. And you can't do that. It's unsustainable. You will not stick to it. It's not going to work. So you need a plan, and you need a strategy to implement said plan in increments, as we've discussed many a time on this platform. And that is kind of how I design. And I can tell a bit of a story, which was quite recent, probably a couple months ago. I realized that I was sleeping like garbage. I was eating snacks at night in bed that weren't conducive to any of the stuff that I'm trying to do. And I'm just lucky enough to have some genetics, and I've trained for so long that I can actually do things, and my body just burns through it. So that makes you feel perhaps invincible at time, and it actually isn't. It still affects you negatively. And I realized that, and I knew that.
Hey, get out of my head.
Yeah, exactly. And then my weight was going down, which isn't a catastrophic thing, but I just like to be a little bit heavier. I started noticing that I was carrying a little bit more anxiety, those types of things. I'm like, okay, I'm doing this year, the way I feel is not the way I optimize my return on investment and my drive and determination as I always have. So I'm doing something wrong here. So I called myself out. When I found out exactly what it was, I went to a sheet of paper and I said, okay, nutrition, what am I eating? When am I eating it? And I'm not talking about breaking down macros and being super scientific about it. I'm talking about don't eat Cheetos and freaking Doritos at night in bed to begin with. Can we start here? And what about not drinking any pop, or even going from 6 to 4, whatever the case may be. But then I started looking at, my workouts were a little bit less consistent, which for decades they have been. And I can make myself a bunch of excuses. My leg's hurting. This is hurting. All this stuff. I'm not making it worse, so it doesn't matter if it's hurting. I need to be a bit better in that controlling my output. And then I started looking at how much sleep I was getting, and I realized, well, you're watching TV too late, or you're on social too much, or you're whatever the case may be. So I called myself out. I said, okay, at this time, this is a hard ceiling. I need to eat this, meat, veggies, and some fuel, some proper fuel every day, which I had skipped doing. And I was skipping meals because I was studying for so long. Anyway, long story short, I made a plan, and I called myself out, made a plan, and implemented those very simple things. I will not skip the meals as I've been skipping meals. I will eat in a better way. I will not eat this crap after this time at night, and all little things that was very simple. And you don't need any intricate knowledge to do that, because you know what's good and what's not. Like, you don't pretend you don't. And at the end of the day, I implemented all those strategies, and next thing you know, I jump on the scale, my weight's back up, I feel better, my anxiety is gone. I've taken some actionable steps that were very simple, but also sustainable. And now I just stayed on the bandwagon, even though I generally don't get off of it. And to a certain extent, I wasn't completely off of it, but certainly in some aspect, I had slid. Complacency hits us all.
Well, you have the luxury, and it's not a luxury that you were born with. It was a luxury that you earned. You have the luxury, the experience, the wherewithal to be able to understand that that's what was happening. And that's because you've been running a tight program for a long, long, long time. Now, there's folks out there that don't have your body of work, the consistent decades of understanding what is required to have optimal outcomes. They might have only experienced it for 2 or 3 years in the army. And then they got out without a structure to support them, without a process to engage in, without a path to head towards. Now they're not consistent, they're not disciplined, they're not focused, they're just day after day, groundhog day, stewing without a directional path. And so you have, again, the luxury is the wrong word, but you've got the luxury of understanding how it all works, where there's a whole boatload of people out there that don't even know there's a program that they can engage in. And so it's easy for maybe us to do it, whereas I'm not saying it's easy, but maybe it's easy for us to do it, whereas for others it isn't easy to do, whatever that means. But they also have an alternate path, and that is called go find someone out there who is doing it every day consistently, not leading the way for everyone, but leading their own life in a way that is inspiring to others, that is demonstrating how it can be done. It's not rocket science. It's just discipline, focus, consistent effort on an outcome that you've set for yourself that you will pursue, whatever that means. And if you can't do all of that by yourself, find a group that is doing it and get engaged with a group that will teach you how to be consistent, disciplined, focused on an outcome that you've set for yourself.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. That says, so no pints of ice cream before bed?
Yeah, he's got a nuclear reactor also. One thing that I'd like to add to this, and just to challenge this a little bit, Shaun, because why not? And I totally agree with you 100%. One of the things that I spoke about earlier, which is willful blindness, I 100% believe that that's in full effect here. If you're eating Cheetos at night, and if you're out of shape, if you're and somehow you don't know there's a plan, like in 2023, if with the material that we have available to us, the research that we can do, the YouTubes, like everything, you can literally build a rocket. Okay. So if something isn't happening, it's because you willfully disregarded it. That is in my opinion, a fact. So the fact that I have something to draw upon so that I can do it, cool. I will give you that. That is absolutely accurate. But if you don't, you should also know you don't. So then who does? It's almost like, when we were young, we had these little cars that drive, and when they hit the wall, they just stay there, or they turn around and they go somewhere else. Anyways, I see humans operating like this. It's willful blindness. I'm going to go somewhere, and if it doesn't work, it's going to actually justify why I didn't do it in the first place. Instead of use your creative brain, think outside the box, be innovative, and start researching, whatever that looks like. Get on Google, type, ideal body weight for my age or time or whatever. The body weight is just something I threw out because I didn't have anything else to think about, but it could be anything. Yes, at the end of the day, if you do need a coach, by all means, go ahead and get a coach, but don't pretend that you didn't know that eating a bag of Cheetos because you don't have decades of working out, and because please, is not the case.
Oh yeah. You're right. You're right. And you're right to raise it, because we've said it before. I think you've been in the conversations when we've had this same sort of topic come up before. We all know when it feels wrong. We all know when we're being lazy. We all know that we're supposed to make changes in our lives if we need to make changes. We feel it. You can't lie to yourself, except when you're lying to yourself. And if you're lying to yourself, what your next step is, that dissonance, that bad frequency, it doesn't feel right. You don't feel right. No one feels right when you know you're doing it wrong. It's the lie, it's the ego, it's the laziness, it's the this, that, and the other thing. It's lots of things that kind of dull down the lie But no matter how much you try to dull it down, there's still that white noise dissonance in the background. As much as you try to ignore it, it's a little sizzle in the back of your brain letting you know that, dude, you're being a goof right now. Dude, pick up the pace right now. Dude, get with the program right now. We all know it. We've all felt it. Everyone does. But it's how much you try to obfuscate it. How about that for a word?
I like it.
Jesus.
I thought it was good.
That makes some
It's
notes
how
here.
much you try to hide yourself from yourself. As you try to hide from you, that's where the dissonance occurs.
100%. The one of the things I tell my boys quite regularly, whenever they butt up against something that's challenging for them, and I say this now, they kind of repeat it even before I get through the whole sentence, but everything is hard until you do it enough times that it gets easy. And that's on a broad spectrum. That's kind of what we're talking about, is that if you have never dealt with nutrition, like I know very little about nutrition, but I do know that eating a bag of Pringles or eating a bag of Miss Vicky's or eating whatever, sitting in bed, it's not good for me. I know that 100%. When I'm at the store and I look at the Dr. Pepper that I love so much, and I'm like, this is not good for me. And I put it back. But years ago, I didn't. And the hard part was learning how to put it back. And then the harder part on that was learning how not to look at it. And it's staged. And, Shaun and I were talking about this yesterday in the green room, was the fact that when you look, there are times where you can look at somebody and think that they're superhuman. They're like, I could never possibly reach that. I can't make it to that peak. There's no way, when you're sitting at the base of the mountain. But if you look at Camp 1, you can make it to Camp 1. Oh, look, there's people on the way to Camp 1. Follow them. And follow that guy, right? And then once you get to Camp 1, oh man, I passed that guy. Okay, cool. I'm going to look for another guy. Oh, we're going to Camp 2? Sweet, we're going to Camp 2. And start your path up that way. And it doesn't matter that the person getting to the peak will get there before you, possibly. Doesn't matter. It's the fact that you're climbing up after them and you're trying to get to that point so that you can have a much better view from the top of the mountain rather than the base of the mountain, or Camp 1 or Camp 2, wherever you decide to go to. So, any final thoughts before we shut her down? We got about 3 minutes or so. Seb, anything last minute on what we're talking about? Nothing?
No, nothing that comes up right now, really. But after Shaun goes, maybe something.
Okay, Shaun, any final thoughts?
Well, I'll try to botch it bad enough that you can clear up my gong show. Well, we started off, I guess, talking about arrogance increasing and accountability decreasing. I think it's fair to say that is currently occurring right now. I feel it's my job, it's our job, it's everyone's job to hold people accountable against their arrogance. But not just their arrogance, hold them accountable to be better human beings. I think they are two different things, but they can be the same thing. If you deliver the right message by inspiring others just to see how awesome they can be, the rest will sort itself out.
That's a great point. Anything now, Seb? After? No, you're still good?
Dude, I tried to botch it.
You failed. You failed miserably.
Dang. That's
okay.
Now I'm gonna get arrogant.
Here we go. We got a couple of little things, and I wanted to bring this back to what we were talking about right at the very beginning, because I think it applies. So what we're talking about is the little things, the little moments, right, where you can hold yourself accountable, or a little moment where you can take appreciation, or a little moment that you can actually be engaged in your life. And Glenn left a comment very early. He said, some of the best moments / conversations of my life have happened over food, or a cup of coffee, or a walk, or or an interaction in the kill house, or walking down on patrol, or sitting in the field when you got nothing to do and you're just staring at the grass, right? All those little moments, especially when you get to hold yourself accountable, or somebody else holds you accountable, or things like that. That's how you grow. We had another point. Alexandra says, I'm sad I missed the mental health walk. Beautiful location. And the book Becoming Supernatural speaks to the power of this collective meditation. exactly what you guys are talking about. So I want to put that up in case anybody hasn't seen that book. I haven't. I'm going to look it up so that I can learn more about it. But yeah, that's all we got for today. I really appreciate everybody listening. Seb, again, thanks for joining us on the Monday. Shaun, always happy to have you around as we learn, build, grow as a part of the collective. And we could all just, I don't know, do our best, perhaps.
How'd you know?
Cheers, boys.
We'll see you all tomorrow. Chimo.
Chimo.